Hello and welcome to this special CNBC Africa panel discussion as we celebrate with a delegation from South Africa, indeed a very strong delegation led by the Premier of the Gauteng province. It also comprises a business delegation that are looking to do a lot more business with Nigeria and indeed Lagos State, which is hosting us today. I am Wole Famurewa and thank you very much for joining us. I'd just like to introduce our panel as we move on to talk about how Lagos and indeed the Gauteng region can foster stronger trade and business ties. And starting from my left, I'd like to introduce Professor Ademola Abass. He is the Senior Special Advisor to the Governor of Lagos State for Overseas Affairs and Investments. And next we have the Premier of the Gauteng region in South Africa, Premier David Makhura.
Thank you.
And sitting next to Premier Makhura, we have Mrs. Toyin Sanni, the CEO of United Capital and Investment Bank, operating in Nigeria and indeed West Africa. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Folusho Phillips, Executive Chairman of Phillips Consulting and the Chairman of the Nigeria-South Africa Chamber of Commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. It promises to be a very engaging conversation around how we can build stronger ties. And I think a good place to start is just to appreciate how we can make this a win-win proposition. Indeed, there's already a very rich history between Nigeria and South Africa, and we are speaking to the engines of growth indeed for these two countries, Gauteng and Lagos. And I would like to start with you, Professor Abass, just to share your perspective on how we can make this more of a win-win proposition. Earlier, we were hearing about how many South African companies have come to Nigeria, well over 100 are operating here, but we hear little about how Nigerian companies are moving that way. Your thoughts on how we can make this a win-win proposition on both sides?
Well, thank you very much, Wole. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting me here. As the Premier will witness, when they visited the governor a couple of days ago, we did mention that we will be working on, first and foremost, a memorandum of understanding between Lagos State and the province of Gauteng to be able to formalize a relationship between the two cities, which, as you've rightly mentioned, are economic powerhouses in individual countries. That is Nigeria and South Africa. I don't think there is any shred of doubt in my mind or in the mind of the state government here that is going to be a win-win situation in so many areas. If you look at the economies of the two cities we are talking about, that is Lagos State and the province of Gauteng. If I'm not wrong, Lagos State today is about $136 billion economy, GDP, which puts Lagos to be the 5th largest economy in Africa. So it means if Lagos were to be a country today, to be the 5th largest in the continent, which is equal to, just to add, about 44 countries in Africa. When you talk about combined, when you talk about countries like, no offense, Namibia, Congo, Brazzaville, and so on and so forth, which has $2 billion, $2.5 billion. You need 44 of those countries to come together to equal the economy of Lagos State. But when you look at Gauteng as an example, you're talking about, if I'm right, about $115 billion economy in South Africa, which is 10% of Africa's GDP as a whole. So again, you're talking about a mega economy within South Africa country itself. Now, when those countries combine, when those cities, or the city of Lagos, state of Lagos and the province of Gauteng combine their resources, there is, number one, you're going to break down barriers. And I'm happy, those are things we're hoping to be able to work on the MOU. There are so many barriers at the moment, not only between Nigeria and South Africa, but across the continent as a whole. And as the Premier emphasized when he visited the State House 2 days ago, development of such nature should not only be driven or be engineered by the African Union, it is what individual countries should take. And if South Africa and Nigeria, with those two cities that are economic houses, can do that, I think the better for, I want to see more Nigerian businesses in South Africa. And I'm happy that Mr. Folusho Phillips is here that can, they'll be able to help with the chambers of commerce and industry. So there will be a lot of outflow of our economic activities from here to South Africa to Gauteng, and there should be a reciprocity.
Right. We'll certainly hear from Mr. Phillips later on, but I do get the sense that it's all about creating the right policy environment, business environment, indeed, that will galvanize those flows. And Premier, you were in Ghana before you visited Nigeria.
Yes.
Indeed, I know that you are trying to also galvanize a lot more interaction with that country. Can you just speak to how the policy environment can make that happen?
Thank you, Wole. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge my fellow panelists who are here. There's also the Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We had a very good meeting as well with the local chamber here. We as the sub-national government in South Africa, and as Professor Abass has already explained, as the major driver of sub-Saharan Africa's, particularly the SADC region's industrial output, 63% of exports coming out of South Africa to anywhere in the world come out of Gauteng's economy, and 42% of industrial output comes out of the Gauteng economy, largely destined to the SADC region. Only 9.4% of our exports come to the West African region and 11% to East Africa. We realize that the national or federal governments in our country are spending a lot of efforts talking about increasing inter-Africa trade, and we think that below that, at sub-national level, our cities and our state, provincial, regional governments, which are much closer to where the real economy is happening, we have to drive these actions to the next level. So we have identified Ghana as a very important country, but we know that in West Africa and in the whole continent, you can't talk of an economy, you can't talk of African affairs without Nigeria, and that's why our High Commissioner was making that point. We think the next phase of the whole efforts around economic integration, industrialization, boosting inter-Africa trade, innovation centers in our continent, the next phase of the development of those is when governments below the national governments really put their effort and pull in their businesses in those areas to create ecosystems where businesses will thrive, but where doing business across the continent would be normal rather than an exception. I had an opportunity to meet a lot of business people who are sitting here over the past 2 days. There's a lot of enthusiasm in Nigeria. There's a lot of enthusiasm in South Africa, because if you think of it, even in sports and everything else, until South Africa and Nigeria say something, you haven't spoken in Africa. Even at the AU, when there are major problems, South Africa and Nigeria need to work together. So to drive our economic development of our continent, Nigeria and South Africa have to do much more. It's in that context that Lagos State and Gauteng have to pull in their full effort in here. And as I say, the governor of Lagos, Governor Ambode, and I are very excited about the opportunity to work together to bring our business people at the right level to create the environments in the two ecosystems in the state of Lagos and in our province, where it can be much easier. Of course, we're going to rely a lot on our missions. Business people have raised issues about it. We must make it easy for them to travel, especially. We have set up in Gauteng as a one-stop shop. Professor Abass is just leading that process here in Lagos. I want to assure business people that it is going to be much, much easier from now on for businesses located in Lagos and those located in Gauteng to do business together. We've got one-stop centers We want to also create additional incentives for businesses to do businesses in the two areas. I want to add that the LCCI, we had a meeting with them. They also want, just as the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in addition to having the Nigeria South Africa Chamber of Commerce, they want to work with the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce. So we are deepening these relations at a level we have never done before.
Right. Wonderful to hear that. And if I can go to Mr. Phillips now, because he has spoken to how trade groups can help galvanize this cooperation. And you've been the chairman of the Nigeria South Africa Chamber of Commerce. What has been your experience in terms of how this relationship has grown? And in your view, what needs to change? I speak again about the business and policy environments that can really galvanize this business activity.
Yes, you know, a lot of people always laugh at me whenever I talk about the Nigeria-South Africa story, because I always start off by saying that we have to start learning to love each other. And it's a very fundamental thing, because there's no doubt about it when you look at the history of Nigeria and South Africa. The intention is there. You know, the leaders, the presidents, the vice presidents, and so on, they've all talked with each other. They've always accepted the fact that we need to work together. But when you drill down to the man on the street, basically, the attitude is a bit different. And that is where we begin to lose this love and this intention. And until we begin to accept each other and realize that we need to work together, we will not make progress. And that's really what has been in the way. So at one extreme, xenophobia, which we know that that's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But you know, when you go along the whole value chain of this relationship, you find out that it only gets strong at the very top, where we're speaking with each other at this point. But when you go lower down, it isn't there. And the way to deal with this is to begin to get us to understand each other. And that's why you find that the lead should not surprisingly be economic issues, but other cultural and social. It's that interaction that we must have and see there's a certain commonality between the two countries. And that's why you find that all the pop shows and the music shows and to a good extent tourism and all those things are very, very people-to-people related, are the ones that seem to be defining how we need to work together at that economic level, or that production, manufacturing, and all that heavy stuff. So from my point of view, that really is what we need to concentrate on. We really need to have a lot of this, but even lower down. And I have attended various functions, both here and in South Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town, and it's all social. And you find again, when you talk to the younger generation, they seem to be a lot more connected than we are. So that's on one hand. The other thing is that we tend, and that's the problem we have, we look at Nigeria, and I say Nigeria is not Nigeria. Nigeria is 36 states, okay? And it's such a huge elephant to deal with that you need to begin to look at some components and parts of it, which is why I'm extremely personally excited about this Gauteng relationship with Lagos State, because you're taking a sort of a small bite that you can deal with. And you can imagine the kind of connectivity that has taken place within the last few days between the Premier and the Lagos State Governor, and the whole intention has worked very well, as opposed to what we've been trying to do at the more national level with the Vice President and the Department of Trade and Industry and all those things, which tend to be very bureaucratic. So there's a lot faster movement where we're dealing with now. So I'm saying that again, yes, let's love each other, which I talk about, but more importantly, let's take it in bite size that we can deal with, and that's what I see us doing here. And once we do that, all those things we want to happen about reciprocity, about respecting the fact that we want to trade with each other. And one thing about trading with each other, I am of this opinion that as much as South Africa says proudly South African, we also want to be able to say proudly Nigerian. So yes, if we don't have enough Nigerians going to do business in South Africa, let's make sure that the business that South Africa does here is one that is engaging Nigerians, is employing Nigerians, and not one in which we're very dependent on imports. And you look at it historically, a lot of the South African companies that have depended on trading, they've suffered a lot when the dollar went crazy on Nigeria. And I know of a few that had to shut down because we're just trading. But those South African companies that are invested in manufacturing, adding value, they've done very, very well. And that again is the way we need to look at these things, in the sense that the kind of relationship we want with South Africa, we want it to be social, to kick it off, we want it to be bite-sized in order to deal with things you can manage. And most important of all, to bear in mind that Nigeria wants to grow its economy and not just spend money in one direction.
A very useful point you've made. And let's speak to the investment banker now to get some perspective on the opportunities that you see, Toyin Sanni, in your engagement with South Africa up to this point, and especially the Gauteng region, which of course is where Johannesburg is based, the financial capital of the country, obviously. And we've seen a lot of investment flows into Nigeria from South Africa over the last decade at least. Your thoughts about the opportunity to get beyond, to move beyond the portfolio flows to the actual foreign direct investment, like into agriculture, into a Lagos State, for instance?
I would like to start by commending the initiative of the Honorable Premier in leading this trade mission. I think it's great, and of course commending His Excellency the Governor of Lagos State for also receiving the Honorable Premier and his team. I think there is no better time than now for this kind of mission. Earlier today, I said Nigeria is rising. I think there are a lot of positive signals that speak to the fact that this is a great time to be doing business with Nigeria and in Nigeria. You will see that we have reform-minded federal government. We have also Lagos State itself as a very proactive, very positive democracy. Lagos State has been blessed consistently with excellent government, and you can see that reflecting in the level and quality of infrastructure. Now, be that as it may, we have a population of 21 million people, putting a huge pressure on this infrastructure. So obviously one of the first areas of investment that I would think that South African companies would look at is investment in infrastructure. So we need investment in road infrastructure, we need investment in rail, light rail, in power, of course. 45% of the power that is produced in Nigeria is consumed in Lagos State. So there is massive opportunity, and Lagos State has a dedicated ministry for energy resources. Lagos State has shown that it is very open to investments in the power sector. We have an economic recovery and growth plan that says that by 2020 we should be generating at least 10,000 megawatts from a base of about 4,000 megawatts. Now, we think, if you remember, that 45% of this is being consumed in Lagos. Lagos is the place where you want to make those kind of investments. So the massive opportunities, entertainment, tourism. Please don't forget real estate. Again, we've got 21 million people to house. I'm sure we know that in terms of the level of penetration and supply, it's grossly under provided for. Right. Those are areas that I think, and if you look at what has happened with a lot of the domestic companies that have invested in providing real estate for the middle, income people, they have been so successful, way beyond their own dreams and imaginations, and then creating problems for them sometimes, with some of them beginning to overtrade. Now, so imagine well-structured companies that have resources, the confidence is there, it's driven by need. So massive opportunities for investment in Lagos. I would say go for power, I would say go for road, rail infrastructure, I would say go for retail, consumer products, because we've got this massive population to take care of. Let me just stop there for now.
Very, very useful areas to put out there. But Professor Abass, I'd like to come back to the point that Mr. Phillips made about just allowing people to meet. Speak to how Lagos State is driving that. And I think tourism is actually something that can galvanize a lot more investment. I think this delegation coming to Lagos is significant. It's coming with people that perhaps have never been to Lagos. They can feel the opportunity. Your thoughts about how Lagos is trying to engage possible visitors from Gauteng?
Well, thank you very much. I think before I do that, let me just take a step back from what Mr. Phillips said, which I think is very important. Look, we can sit here and dance around this issue about investment, about exchanges between the two countries. But there are certain realities we have to wake up to, whether you are South Africans or you are Nigerians or you are Kenyans. And I think those are things that hopefully when we come down to the level of MOU, we're not going to just be drafting some MOU that will be useless to both parties. We have to accept certain realities. And those realities will boil down from the first realization that Lagos is a state in Nigeria. Gauteng is a province in South Africa. We operate at subnational level. There are national governments. So you cannot connect people at that base level if your national governments in the first place do not talk to each other. Let me give you an example. I used to spend part of my adult life in the UK. And we were running a program between King's College in those days and some institution in Kenya. I'm telling this because it's today Lagos and Gauteng, that is Nigeria and South Africa. Tomorrow might be Kenya and Ghana, just to show that connecting people should go beyond, you know. Whenever, in those days, whenever I was living in the UK, using my Nigerian passport very happily, whenever I was going to Kenya in those days, and I request a visa from Kenyan embassy in London, they would tell me they would have to send that request to their home country in Kenya. So I will wait, believing me sincerely, to take 4 or 5 months, I won't get a response. So I lost 2 vital trips. So one day I said, we have a Kenyan embassy in Lagos in those days. So you know what I used to do? I'll pick my happily green passport, fly down to Lagos, the following day, walk into that embassy, within 24 hours, get the same Kenyan visa on my passport, fly back to London to join my colleagues, and fly to Kenya. Now, and I'll just mention this, then I got, in those days, a British passport, and I flew down to Kenya with my British passport. Of course, no visa. I got to the airport. The question is, how long are you staying in Kenya? I said, well, 4 or 5 days. They just put dash on my passport. I can come and die there, literally. I was taken aback. And for me, this anecdote is not just for the fun of it. When you want to connect people, what are your national governments doing? That's number one. I used to have some relationship with Pretoria University and Cape Town. So I used to go to South Africa a lot. And I had a lot of friends who, work and live in South Africa. And I'm talking about, and I'm happy Your Excellency mentioned that when you were speaking about the relationships between Nigeria and few Nigerians today probably remember that adult working Nigerians during the apartheid government were paying 2% tax to fund apartheid system in South Africa. No, by no means are we saying that, so therefore you have a right to do whatever you want to do. But I'm happy that Mr. Ambassador did reflect that in a sentence, that we've come very far to come and allow ourselves to be torn apart by sheer bigotry, by prejudices on both sides. Don't get me wrong. So for me, connecting people must start with both countries first and foremost, realizing that we have a lot of work to do. Otherwise, this relationship will go to nothing. And I'm happy you did mention that, at the level of music, entertainment, and this and that. You see, thankfully, my generation probably is a bit better than His Excellency's generation in terms of connecting. And those who are coming behind us are a lot better. And I'm happy they are breaking, because, you go to Tanzania, there was a day I was in Dar es Salaam, I was in a hotel, and I was hearing, what is the song? One Ferrari, and right there. And I was happy, not because that music was simply Nigerian, but because I was listening to an African country music being played and there was a time I was in Nairobi and they sang this song, Baby Sawale, Sawa Sawa. Now, for us who in this audience who are Yoruba, you know what Baby Sawale means. It's like, oh girl, just come back home, stop running all over the place. But see, Sawa Sawa in Swahili means okay, okay. So I was in a Kenyan club And they started the song, Baby Sawa, you would think it was a Kenyan national anthem. Everybody was like, baby, and all the girls said, Sawa, Sawa, Sawa. Because Sawa, Sawa for the girls means Kenya, okay. So I called my Kenyan friend, do you know what Sawa, Sawa means in my life? He said, Ademola, I don't care. Here it means baby is okay. What I'm saying is that I think on those levels we can connect. We are ready to do business. We have an office in Lagos State here, my office, which is supposed to be promoting the concept of one-stop shop. And again, maybe that is the academic in me. I was just sharing it with some colleagues. I don't have any shame. I told the governor, you know what? It's a great idea, but we have to learn. And we have to learn, first and foremost, from countries in Africa that have come through terrible periods. For instance, Rwanda, which until recently was probably number 1 or number 2 in Africa in ease of doing business. And I told the governor, if Rwanda, about which nothing was known in 1994 than that they killed 1 million of their people, who wake up from that and become one of the best FDI destinations in Africa, what are we doing in Lagos? So I told him, I'm not going to sit here in office and be imagining how you do one-stop shop. I'm going to get off. And I was telling you, I took South Africa, Mauritius, Rwanda, Singapore, Finland, UK. I picked 7 countries that we can learn from. I'll never forget the day I went to Rwanda, just about 2-3 months ago. And I went to the RDB, Rwanda Development Board. The first thing that shocked me, you get in, it takes 4 hours to register a company in Rwanda, and it takes 6 hours to get a construction permit. And then they shocked me that their target is 3 hours. I don't want to tell us what it takes here. So I came back straight and I told Mr. Governor that, you see, you think we're working in Lagos, we have to think again. He was like, why? I said, I just came back from Rwanda. And they were shocked because I said, look, when I go there, I've come to learn. I'm not here to come and tell you anything. Tell us how you've done it in Rwanda. And they said, Nigerians don't learn from anybody. How can you come and learn? I said, well, you got it wrong. Anyway, and Mr. Governor said, okay, what do you want to do? I said, we're going to go back there with a much powerful delegation and spend 1 week and learn every single day how they were able to move that country to that level. We are on that today. So for me, connecting happens at different levels, but our countries must start that battle.
Absolutely. Very strong points made. Premier, if you can just, as we begin to round up, just speak to what you are hoping to achieve with this Memorandum of Understanding with the Lagos State government.
I think just to go back to the fact that these are the engines of our national economies, but the impact of both Lagos and Gauteng province is felt in our regions, in ECOWAS, as well as in the SADC region. So one of the things that we are focusing at through this memorandum is to increase the exchange between our businesses on the side of manufacturing activity, especially advanced manufacturing. Gauteng has got significant advanced manufacturing capacity. Actually, when at the World Economic Forum on Africa, people talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution. It is taking place here in Africa. We have advanced manufacturing capabilities. We have a lot of our businesses that are already doing 3D manufacturing capabilities that are elsewhere in the world. But we've got to bring these capabilities in African markets. And so one of those things we would like to do is, because Nigeria, the Lagos economy has got a lot of advantages, but what we know is that we need to deepen industrialization. So we target, especially in the automotive industry, capital equipment and heavy machinery, for both drilling as well as construction and mining. We want to see increasingly South African businesses moving into African markets, not just to sell their equipment, not just to open sales offices, to set up plants. And that also includes agro-processing. Africa produces a lot of food, or let me put it differently. We, as Africans, we import a lot of food from all over the world, largely Europe. But we have arable land, large tracts of arable land. What we need, and in our provincial economy, we are the agro-processing hub of the SADC region. So we don't produce lots of primary agricultural products, but they are brought to Gauteng for processing, for packaging, for export into the different markets into our continent. We want to also bring those capabilities into the Lagos State, so that Lagos so the type of industrialists and business people we're bringing is sector by sector. Right. There are also business people who are in the technology sector, who are in finance. We know Lagos is very strong in finance and technology. Outside the economic cooperation areas, we also want to strengthen governance. Because in the end, economies and business people may try their luck, but if you have governments that don't work properly, they will kill business, and a government that doesn't work kills business. In the context of what Professor Abass, we need to cut red tape. Right. One of the things we are going to be working on is team government. Good governance is important for both us and Lagos. Corruption destroys business. If every time you must come and establish a business in an area, you must pay somebody to do the things that they are supposed to do, by the time you have gone all the way, you have no money to set up the business. So we have to we must say, both Lagos and South Africa, that you can't do business without paying somebody a bribe. But we also managing complex urban systems. 22 million people in Lagos State, 13 million people in South Africa. High rate of urbanization. People are continuing to move to the cities. So the urban management of our cities, how to deal with infrastructure, how to provide for those who are still on the way, we are young cities. Most of the people who come to Lagos from elsewhere in Nigeria, and those who come to Gauteng are largely the youth. So we also have to create economies and ecosystems that are very responsive to the youthful populations we have. So we are also going to be sharing experiences there. What programs can we put in place to ensure that we build economies that are responsive to the youth? Skills development. How do we get our universities to work together? And so our approach to these relations is that they must be mutually beneficial. We don't want a one-way traffic where only South African businesses benefit. That's not sustainable. People will resent that. We want a situation where Nigerians can see that South Africa is also bringing capital capacity, not just invest money that moves quickly, but capacity, investing in manufacturing capacity. And the only way that we can drive industrialization is if Nigeria and South Africa step up. And I think the two states and provinces, we think we're going to do a lot to lead by example. There's going to be a lot of movement of people, but also of business to business and government to government relations.
No, we certainly look forward to that, and hearing you speak about it, it does sound like it's well thought out, but as they usually say, the devil is in the detail and, of course, execution. But, Mr. Phillips, I want to get your thoughts on this point, and we would say that there is a new economy emerging. Incidentally, when Nigeria's GDP was rebased, we began to get a sense of what was going on in sectors like the creative industry and entertainment. And I just want to hear your thoughts about these emerging economies and how we can make the most of that relationship between Nigeria and South Africa. So we're talking about everything from IT to the creative industry, which we know Nigeria is really going for at this time.
Yeah, that's you're very right. And the situation, it's always where you depend on an individual's capability, skill, that they tend to just fly. Right. So, our young folks who are doing fantastic things in the digital world, they're doing it because there are no restraints. They're not waiting for permits and approvals. They're just getting on with it. And therefore, you find them really doing wonderful things. And I think that's the same thing with the creative arts. For as long as you don't have to go and get government permission for land, for licenses and so on, people just tend to express themselves. And we're doing that very, very well. Just as an aside, we talk about the lack of investment of Nigerian entities in South Africa. But don't forget, I don't have the data, but I know that we have a lot of doctors, we have a lot of lawyers, we have a lot of professionals, lecturers in universities working very, very actively in South Africa. And obviously they're remitting money home. So they're obviously generating, whilst contributing to South Africa, they're also generating a lot of income. Without deviating from the point you made, and I do recognize that, yes, the digital world, the new world economy is one in which we're very active and we're moving ahead with that in spite of anybody. And that, like I said, is with the younger generation. But if you look at Nigeria itself, it's important that South Africa keys into what's important to us. And the number one thing for Nigeria, from my understanding, when we look at the recent strategic plan, if I can say we have, is about food security. And attached to food security is looking at agriculture and the agricultural value chain. And that's one area that there's a quick win for us, because everybody's getting into agriculture. And if you're not planting, you're packaging. And again, the young folks, I just love our young people in terms of the things they're doing, in terms of packaging, in terms of designing electronic systems that allow you to have access to markets. So what you have is, because we've got this digital platform that's allowing people to order goods online, deliver goods, and do all these wonderful things, it's creating a phenomenal pull factor from those who supply. So if you have a person who's got this delivery system for food, it's putting pressure on the farmer to deliver more. And the farmer is saying to himself that, well, I can invest, because before I worry that my output gets rotten or there's nobody to buy it. Now there's this constant pull factor because it's so convenient to buy now. So the younger generation are tuning into this. And when you mentioned the Honorable Premier about the expertise that Gauteng has with respect to food, packaging and so on, that's something that we definitely need here, because that's where we're at right now. We're producing the stuff, but we can't package. Now, the more we can package, the more farmers can produce. And I tell you, our import bill will reduce substantially and we heighten our food security. The last thing I want to say is that, again, what I would advise the Lagos State government and the Gauteng to do is what we try to do at the national level, which we're still trying to sort out and actually actualize it, is the Business Council. So we're looking for a business council at the level of Nigeria, South Africa, which I know we're trying to do with the Minister for Trade and Industry in Investments. Yeah. But we're saying that I'm advising that for Lagos State and Gauteng, set up your own business council. Yes. And so it's not just an MOU, it's an actual living body that's looking continuously at the kind of relationship and how you can make this thing happen.
I think you make a very strong point. And it obviously excites people in the crowd. If you can just take this further, because Mr. Sanni, you are an investment banker, you are trained and you have the skills to bring deals together to make them happen. We've seen the commitment of the government. We've heard some great ideas about the need for a business council. Yeah. Maybe you can just add your thoughts to how we can practically move to the next level in terms of driving this relationship.
Well, I would always say that private sector involvement is very important. Governments put in place frameworks and they also create relationships. So the kind of doors that the Honorable Premier and the Executive Governor are opening are fantastic. Now, to follow through, we're going to need the private sector to begin to milk those opportunities that are being created. So clearly there need, beyond the council that is working on behalf of the government, there also needs to be a clear handshake between businesses in Nigeria and businesses in Lagos State in particular, and businesses in Gauteng. It's interesting because there's so many commonalities between the state and the province. Beyond the fact that this is our economic hub in Nigeria and the province is the economic hub in South Africa, we're looking at both the state and the province that have the smallest land area, and yet the greatest economic activity. Incidentally, the largest population as well, struggling to survive in on this small area. So a lot of pressure on infrastructure, but a lot of opportunities as well. One of the areas that I would recommend that the Premier and our South African friends also look at is health services. Nigerians spend billions of dollars on health tourism. Now, if we can, I think the quality of health services in South Africa and specifically within your province is much higher than what we have here. Now, can you invest in, health delivery institutions here? So, next stage is probably having a working plan that will involve private sector champions on both sides, exploring some of these ideas that have been discussed, and also coming up with a wish list probably of policy concessions that will be required to drive these initiatives, and then they will take it from there.
All right. Professor Abass, I see you've been making quite a couple of notes there, and practically many will suggest that a lot of that investment flow will be coming to Lagos in the short to medium term, but hopefully we'd like to see the flows also moving the other way. How do you react to some of the things we've said today?
Well, thanks a lot. I think I want to see more move from South Africa to Lagos, obviously.
Right, of course. That is your...
That's my thought.
Yes.
But I think on a more serious note, there has been a slight imbalance in the past. That is between the countries, not between Lagos and Gauteng per se, but between Nigeria and South Africa. And no matter how much one wants to be very measured and very generous about one's thoughts, the reality is that certain policies at the South African end have to change. And that is why I was saying that, look, the governor is very, very excited about this relationship between the two cities, but certain things have to happen. And for me, it might take certain legislative interventions to make those things work. Nigeria struggled a lot with the ease of doing business. And I think at the moment we rank 169 out of about 190-something countries. But the federal government did something that I wouldn't have thought I would see in my life for a long time. Just last week, when executive orders were rolled out. Not the one like Donald Trump, the difference, were rolled out. And I was asking myself, would they follow through? But before they began to implement. All those things will ease things up eventually, at least at the national level, which then makes it a lot easier for Lagos as a state. Because no matter how brilliant you are, you cannot clap with one hand. Simple. No matter what Lagos wants to do, you still need the overarching authority of the federal government in so many areas, whether it's immigration or bringing things through the port, and so many, even as common as energy, which is very, very vital. So those things are very, very important for us. And I think my charge to our colleagues from South Africa is that there must be a rethinking of the process in which other African countries are allowed to invest in South Africa. There's no running away from that fact. Because I know this is a fact I know for sure why it can be quite difficult for other Africans to invest in that country. Which is why I say I am more interested now in investment flowing basically from there here, because it's been the other way. So I think that is very, very important thing that I think we should do. And I buy entirely what you said, Ma, about the private sector. Look, governments worldwide have no business doing businesses. Full stop. And I think that is the model our government has adopted so far. So for me, there must be legislative interventions on both sides to make it a lot easier for our people to be able to. I want to be able to jump into South Africa and not to worry about being attacked. You know, in those days, one of my highest points in all the times I spent in the West, in the UK basically, whenever they are talking about xenophobia and this and that, I always counted my British friends. I said, you know what, I got better education in Nigeria than you lot. And they said, why? I said, because you will never hear that Westerners were attacked on Nigerian streets because of the color of your body. I haven't seen this before.
True.
I said, but if somebody was kidnapped in Niger Delta for economic reasons, I could be kidnapped in Niger Delta for the same economic reasons. I said, so, you know, and that is because of the kind of the quality, maybe of legislative intervention and so on and so forth. Those are things I think we really need to factor into our system as we drive on this particular relationship.
So lawmaking obviously very key
is important
in driving things forward. Folusho Phillips, can you also reflect again on some of the issues he has raised about why we're not seeing those flows into South Africa? I think it's a very important and very open conversation that we need to have.
Let me spend 2 seconds to tell you my wine story. My wine story, each time over the years we've looked at the balance of trade between Nigeria and South Africa, and we said there's been positive in favor of Nigeria, but that's been significantly from oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I said, if you take a liter of crude oil, all right, and see the effort we made to produce a liter of crude oil, and compare it to a liter of wine, and the effort South Africa has made to produce a liter of wine, you find that the level of engagement to produce a liter of wine is significantly higher than the level of economic engagement Nigeria has gone through to produce a liter of crude oil. So when we say that we've exported and we have positive balance of payments, that might be it at that level. But in terms of economic engagement, South Africa has gained a lot more when we exchange those liters of bottles. So that's the first thing about the ability to ensure that whatever it is we're doing is something that is engaging the people. And that's why I would talk about this value chain. If you look at what's important to this country, yes, we talked about the agriculture, we talked about the need for industrialization, and even within that, diversifying the economy, looking at the SMEs, it's a whole new ball game that is creating phenomenal opportunity. We're looking at the new digital world, whereby the ability to go and do things digitally is creating in every sector that you think of, and that itself is a great plus. Now, when we talk about investments and lack of it, I always say, how do we want to invest in South Africa if we want to go that way? You can either go and put your money, and I know of somebody many years ago that bought a South African winery, okay, invested significantly in it, and started importing South African wines into Nigeria. And for him, that was the way he was trying to make his own money. If we don't have things to sell in South Africa, if we don't have things to produce in South Africa, then we suffer. But don't forget that even we as a country, let's be frank, we suffer from not having things to sell. We are not a very productive economy. We don't produce in Nigeria. When you begin to talk about manufacturing, and by the time you count on your fingers and toes, we've gone past the major producers. So we are not doing enough ourselves. So we really must not blame South Africa too much. But having said that, the ease of doing business, the ease of actually creating corporate entities in South Africa, the BEE rules, I've had situations where, if you don't have a black South African female and so on holding significant shares in your company, you can't deal. And then also, if you don't qualify, then you can't work for government, you can't do this. So all kinds of things that stand in your way, which in reverse, in Nigeria, doesn't happen. A South African will come, set up a 100% owned South African company and just do whatever he wants, as long as he obeys the rules that apply to all the companies without any form of discrimination. So in some ways, there are things that stand in the way of some, I'll say they say it's foreign, it's not directed at Africans, but there's no special concession that's given to Africans saying that let's try and see how we can encourage the way and manner in which we can do business. So these things do stand in the way, and I suppose that's what issues about legislation and agreeing what it is we're going to do. One other thing about the Business Council I mentioned is going to be significantly driven by the private sector and some sprinkling of government in it.
Yeah.
Right. Right, Premier Makhura, I'll give you the final word. Obviously, a lot can only be achieved if we see change on the national level, but within the constraints, I just want you to speak to this audience and, of course, to all those who are hoping that this trip to Lagos will not be in vain. Your perspective.
Well, let me first just acknowledge that one of the great inhibitors of inter-Africa trade is our different regulatory regimes. This is an experience not just between South Africa and Nigeria, but the AU is caught up. It makes decisions there, but at state level, at national governments have put in place the laws that make it very, very difficult for what we pronounce African regeneration, African unity, economic integration. Those things are difficult to do as a result of that. So we need to harmonize the laws across the continent, in a sense, not just between one country and the other, to create a common market in that way. So I certainly agree that we need to do that. We also have work we are doing as the provincial government in Gauteng about improving the ease of doing business. There are a lot of regulatory things that are they are not about the national laws. They're about trading and licensing and applications for approval of if someone wants to come, Nigerian business person wants to come and establish a business here. A lot of those, sometimes we also, I would imagine we overburden our national governments with things that should be addressed by efficient subnational governments, our cities. In South Africa, we have got cities that have constitutional power. They can slow down things. Yeah. Provincial governments also can slow down things. So we in Gauteng, we have our investment center, the Gauteng Investment Center, has got all national departments sitting in there, from visas to issues about tax. The municipalities are also, we bring the municipalities in there. That's a mechanism that is really working much better. We also, in there, we able to waive some of the regulations, municipal regulations. Some of the environmental regulations, we have cut that drastically, reduced the time it takes to wait for an approval on environmental regulations. So the ease of doing business is something that can be done even at state level and at provincial level. But the national laws that make it more difficult, and in my own view, that we will have to take up if we want to see greater inter-Africa trade, we will have to have a very different regulatory regime, smart regulation. Right. I think African governments are too inclined to over-regulating business.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the business, the problem everywhere. It's whereas in many dispensations, it is if you want business to come and locate in your area, we're not just competing in Africa, we're competing with the world.
Yeah.
And as the Gauteng provincial government, we are doing a lot. We've got, there are areas on which we have authority, and on those that we have authority on, we are improving the ease of doing business in those. So we will work with Lagos State on all of those, and we also take up issues with our national government. On the visas, for example, we have been very outspoken when we know that Nigeria has got a huge inflow of tourists into South Africa. When there were visa regulations that were making it a bit more difficult, we also take up. So even if we may not have as a provincial and state governments, we may not have the law. I think we can work together to go to our governments, federal governments, and say, please, this law is killing business.
Right. I really have to round it up now. Very useful insight into the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa, and of course, the Gauteng region and Lagos. I've been speaking to David Makhura, the Premier of the Gauteng region in South Africa. Professor Ademola Abass is the Senior Special Advisor to the Governor of Lagos, oversees affairs and investment. We've also had Folusho Phillips, the Chairman of the Nigeria-South Africa Chamber of Commerce. And last but certainly not least, we've had Toyin Sanni, the CEO of United Capital, giving some useful perspective on how we can increase trade and business relations between Gauteng and Lagos. I'm Wole Famurewa, thanking you for watching.